This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices fell on Tuesday as traders weighed the possibility that talks between Russia, Ukraine and the U.S. to end the war in Ukraine could lead to the lifting of sanctions on Russian crude, raising supply. Brent crude futures were down 62 cents, or 0.93%, to $65.98 a barrel at 12:22 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for September delivery, set to expire on Wednesday, were down 66 cents, or 1.04%, to $62.76 per barrel. Following a White House meeting on Monday with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European allies, U.S. President Donald Trump announced in a social media post that he had spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Chinese refineries have purchased 15 cargoes of Russian oil for October and November delivery as Indian demand for Moscow's exports falls away, two analysts and one trader said on Tuesday. India has emerged as the leading buyer of Russian seaborne oil, which has sold at a discount since some Western nations shunned purchases and imposed restrictions on Russian exports over Moscow's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Indian state refiners paused Russian oil purchases last month, however, as those discounts narrowed. And U.S. President Donald Trump is also threatening to punish countries for buying Russian crude.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
India is curbing solar output during periods of low demand to keep its power grid stable and to ease congestion in power lines as green energy supply rises, its Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, MNRE, told Reuters. Congestion in power lines due to some new plants coming into operation ahead of schedule and delayed transmission projects have also forced power output curbs, also known as curtailment, the MNRE said in an emailed response to questions late on Monday. The curtailments are the latest setback to India's renewable power developers, who are increasingly languishing without supply contracts as demand for power slows.
Indonesia plans to build a network of small modular refineries to process U.S. and domestic oil, aiming to reduce gasoline imports. But analysts warn the switch in strategy from large-scale refining facilities could prove uneconomical. The prefabricated refinery units, which can be constructed faster and more cheaply than traditional plants, will help Asia's largest importer of gasoline meet domestic demand and its commitment to increase U.S. imports. Indonesia's focus on small refineries runs counter to the global trend of ever larger crude processing facilities that maximize economies of scale, analysts say. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Iron ore futures prices slid on Tuesday, pressured by concerns about demand for the steelmaking ingredient amid output controls in the northern region of top consumer China ahead of a military parade in early September and a weakening steel market. The most traded January iron ore contract on China's Dalian Commodity Exchange closed daytime trade 0.64% lower at 771 yuan, $107.35, a metric ton. The benchmark September iron ore on the Singapore exchange was down 0.37% at $101.05 a ton, as of 0722 GMT.
There is an upward trend in India-China relations and Beijing has promised to address New Delhi's needs on rare earths, a top Indian official and a source said on Tuesday, as the neighbors rebuild ties that were damaged by a 2020 border clash. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is visiting India for the 24th round of border talks with Indian National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and is also due to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday, days before Modi travels to China for the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. There has been an upward trend. Borders have been quiet, there has been peace and tranquility, Doval told Wang as he opened the talks. Our bilateral engagements have been more substantial.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
India has suspended an 11% import duty on cotton until September 30th, in a move seen as a signal to Washington that New Delhi is willing to address U.S. concerns on agricultural tariffs, while also easing pressure on its garment industry. The temporary suspension, announced late on Monday, could benefit U.S. cotton growers and provide relief to India's apparel sector, which faces tariffs of nearly 60% on shipments to the United States from later this month. A planned visit by U.S. trade negotiators to New Delhi from August 25 to 29 has been called off, delaying talks on a proposed bilateral trade agreement and dashing hopes of relief from an additional 25% U.S. tariff on Indian goods from August 27.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.